Okay, Sairam, it's 5 o'clock. We will start the study circle with 3 ohms. Sairam, as you know, we have been discussing Bhagavata Vahini, written by author by Swami. We have been discussing this. We are blessed to discuss this topic. As part of this, we are discussing several Swami's discourses. Basically, this Bhagavata Vahini talks about ex- experiences of Parikshit, and he describes what happened in Mahabharata. And we are in chapter 7 of that book, where Vidura goes and talks to Dhritarashtra and convinces him to go and go to the forest or go to a recluse and not be in the palace, because after the war, the Dhritarashtra continues to be in the palace because Dharmaraja is so benevolent. He wants to still keep Dhritarashtra. So this is where Vidura, who wants to convince Dhritarashtra to go to the exile, and Dhritarashtra tries to tell what he can do because he is blind. And so Vidura convinces him to go with Gandhari, and he agrees to lead them to the forest. And so they leave the forest. That is the chapter 7. We listened to that in the few sessions back. So as part of that, what we have been discussing in the last 2 sessions is Dharmaraja's act of forgiving. So the whole topic that we are discussing right now is forgiveness. So how to forgive, what is there to forgive, how we can forgive, and what are the challenges for forgiveness. And as part of that, as we have been doing in the past few sessions, we have taken Swami's discourses on that topic and we discussed that. So here, what we are doing is taking Swami's discourse on forgiveness and discussing. So this is just to summarize because there are newcomers here. So before we, I'm sorry. So I'm not able to go to the PowerPoint. Escape. It's not taking me out. Uh, sorry. Hmm? Okay. So what we are, okay, before we start, let's let's offer a small prayer to Swami. Dear Swami, we are so grateful to be able to meet here together in your presence today. While we are here together studying your word in your Bhagavata Vahini, we ask that you open our ears and hearts to whatever it is you want us to learn. Please speak through each one of us and help us progress in our spiritual journey. Jai Sai Ram. Sai Ram, brief thing about the etiquette. Please mute your cell phones and let's be focused and stay on the topic. And a most important thing is to leave our ego out in this. And let's focus and try to learn some of the things that we discuss here so that we progress in our spiritual path. Okay, Sairam, just a summary of what we discussed in the last session. We discussed Swami's quote on forgiveness. Some of the salient points is love should be inherent in forgiving anyone. Conditional and unconditional love, we talked about that. And we talked about affection versus love affecting forgiveness. In other words, are we more willing to forgive our near and dear ones than somebody else? And then we talked about what are all the challenges to forgive others. Forgiveness happens with time. We did discuss that. As we go further, maybe we were easier to forgive. Right then, when the incident happens, it's very difficult to forgive. So then quality of forgiveness. Does forgiveness erase the affect completely? That was a topic, that was one of the points. Because even after we forgive, the relationship may not be the same as what happened before a rift or something happens. So that we talked about that. And then repeated actions, despite forgiving, how long should one forgive? So sometimes we forgive and then that again keeps happening. Then should we keep forgiving again and again? Or what is there a limit? So that was a point that was raised. And forgiveness should be followed by action. That was mentioned. In other words, just forgiving mentally, oh, I forgive that person. Is that sufficient? Should we go to the person and then apologize or not apologize? Should we convince or should we tell that person that we forgive? So should we do that? So that is a point that was raised. And forgiveness requires strength. Weak forgiving someone, irrelevant. First step is to forgive before acting. So I just wrote, we did talk about the strength um, because it's not easy to go and forgive. So it requires the strength to go and forgive. And we did talk about devotion in that Swami's discourse, love and devotion, and then forgiving the actions. So we did talk about whether we can forgive the actions that were made and love as a solution to forgiving persons. So these are all some of the things that we discussed. And before we proceed for this week's topic, do anyone have anything to add?
So I do want to add here at the end of the session last time, um, you know, I would like to confirm, reaffirm what Uma said and what Bhargav said. Ultimately, forgiveness is us. What we, some of the points, like we don't have to really worry about, be concerned about what the impact is on the person. So, for example, we talked about forgiveness of people, forgiveness of action. Action, we ourselves do something which you regret later on, and we need to be forgetting others. So that particular action could also be a subject for which we need forgiveness, and that may not involve anybody else other than you. So ultimately, it comes down to you know us getting rid of all the resentment and everything, and be calm by yourself, and that kind of I feel falls into the whole purpose of the Sai Center. At the end of it, you know, we are trying to find the divinity in us. And if we find that divinity within us, it is very easy to find the divinity in the other. So I think the whole thing is that it should be for us to clean up rather than worry about what we do to the others. So,
Good, Saida. That's a good point. Anybody else? Okay, so we will move on. So what, as I mentioned, we are discussing chapter 7. What I thought was to go and look into the point that was raised. I think last time Uma raised that point as to should we repeat people who keep offending us in many ways? Should we keep forgiving? Is there a limit, or should we move on, or should we, what is there? So I looked at that Swami's quote on that one. So we will start with that. So basically, I wanted to say, um, I think we will move to that. Okay. Om, why don't you please read this quote?
You must use your discrimination while helping others. Think to what extent you can help such people. I have told the story earlier also when Muhammad Ghori attacked Prithviraj, he was completely defeated by him. But Prithviraj, be, being a large hearted ruler, forgave him and let him go scot free. Later, Muhammad Ghori again attacked Prithviraj and defeated him. Muhammad Ghori made Prithviraj captive and blinded him. He did not have gratitude toward Prithviraj, who had earlier allowed him to go back unharmed. You should therefore be cautious in practicing forgiveness while dealing with a cruel person. No doubt forgiveness is a great virtue, but it will do more harm than good if it is practiced with respect to an evil minded person. You should forgive such a person once or at most twice. Do not forgive him every time he harms you, otherwise, you will be put to danger.
Okay. So Swami has given a correct and correct. I mean, he has described that, but it's not as simple. I think before we proceed any.
So, Saira, anybody else want? Okay. So, if you remember last time when we discussed, I mentioned one of the point. Like forgiveness is the act between two persons. Right? If that other person is not asking any forgiveness, where is the action of forgiving? That's what I was pointing out. So the question here is, the Muhammad Ghori was defeated multiple times. He was left without, harm. The reason Muhammad Ghori did not ask for forgiveness. Did he ask forgiveness? You let him go, walk away, right? So that person was not actually having any repent. Like, no, I was defeated by this guy. I did wrong thing. So I need to ask apologies. I should not repeat the same action. He came second time. That means you already forgave. Without asking, you let him go. Second time he came. Again, he defeated. You let him go. He didn't ask for any forgive. Why somebody needs to do that when the other person is not realizing the mistake that he is doing multiple times without asking? So there is no point of forgiving if the other person is not actually realize the mistake. That person has to realize the mistake, come, request, apologize, and then you forgive. That's when the forgiveness act comes into the picture.
I get,
That's a
yeah.
good point. Yeah.
I'm glad you found this. I didn't know Swami has mentioned this. Saira, that reminds me, he says you have to know the cruel person, forgiveness is a great virtue, but it will do more harm than good. This reminds me of the story. Many of you might know this person is walking along and he sees a snake. This is a story, so snake can talk, okay? So the snake says, I'm hurt. Can you take me and put me near the river? That's where I am from. So this man says, oh, okay, but you are a snake. I'm afraid to take you. He said, no, 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 please help me. I'm helpless. I cannot crawl all the way to the river bank. So this man puts the snake in his pocket and take the snake and put it near the river bank, wherever the snake wanted to go. While going, the snake bit him. So he says, you said you won't bite me, but you did. I helped you. The snake says, you know, I am a snake. This is my nature. You should know that. So this is like what Swami say, you should know the person or you should know the nature of them and then go help. So it is not the snake's fault. Like you were saying, Gauri didn't ask for Prithviraj to forgive him, but it is Prithviraj's nature. But it seems like it was wasted on him. But it depends on the person's nature for one thing. And also, if you repeatedly, last week I raised the question, I have seen it with my eyes in the family issues. Keep on forgiving, keep on repeating the offender, doing the same thing over and over. There's no end. Nobody was happy at the end. The person died also. But somebody pointed out, we talk about him even after the death. You know, both parties are gone, but the memory is still there. Yeah.
So I slightly differ here in my kind of my thoughts. So a fire, as you all said, a fire is a fire. You put your hand there, you will burn your hand, right? So we need to understand the nature of the fire. You cannot change the nature of the fire, but what you can do is understand the nature and act accordingly, right? So similarly, when we say forgiveness, it is not like we are forgiving. That means you are going and becoming a friend in this case. You cannot do that. Like Rama, he forgave Ravana in spite of Ravana doing all that atrocities. That doesn't mean that he did not go and, kill Ravana and do all that stuff. But when you do it with such a vengeance, with this kind of a very, very, dark emotions, that is when it becomes a problem. Then you are you are spiritually going back 10 steps. When you are doing it with the right, like in the Nantak, what said, the Buddhist monk, they burned themselves because they didn't do it. They did it out of love because end product they want is a positive outcome out of that. So we need to understand that if Prithvi Raj had, he doesn't need to forgive in the sense that, oh, you go scot free, but he doesn't have to hold that grudge and that anger that bottled up in him. That is what I think is what Swami is talking.
So this is good, but they always say forgive but don't forget.
That's true. That is true.
So I know you said forgiveness is between two people, but really forgiveness is about me as an individual. So let's just say somebody did something, right? Instead of that, okay, like you're driving. Let's just go 64, you're driving. This person comes and whatever, and I'm still at work thinking about that. And that person is not even thinking of me. I need to let go because that other person, like you said, yeah, they didn't ask forgiveness, but I'm still thinking about it. So it's really about me. That's my thing about forgiveness, because the other person, they may or not, but it's really about me. It's just that I will know now the next time with that situation, whether it's a snake or whether it's a dog or whatever, just to remind myself to be aware. But, so that's where my understanding of forgiveness is, that that other person doesn't have to ask for it, but I just need it because it's really about me. Otherwise, I'm going to be thinking about it. It could be go both ways. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I was looking at this evil-minded person. So you have to be very sure about the other person. This Mohammed Gori may have lied a lot. He might have asked for forgiveness. He might have, a lot of evil people do lie a lot. They're not truthful. He won't say, oh, you leave me and I'll come back. So we don't know what the circumstances were. And in day-to-day life, there's something called Vyavaharik Satya and there's something called Paramarthik Satya. Where if you do Paramarthik Satya, then all the time you will be bitten like this saintly person by the snake, because that's the nature of her. But if you're going to live in the world, you do have to judge and go by, yes.
Yes, sir. So I agree with the point which you mentioned. Did he ask? Because that is a gray area, because we are talking about the history which we don't know the facts here. So I was just taking that as a granted. He did not ask for forgive. It could be he might have asked the forgive. I mean, so the next point is there was a kind of point, Bhargav, that if somebody did something they did not ask, you're still forgiving. We have to forgive, something like that, the statement, right? So it's what I feel about that point here is, let's say we are going on highway traffic, somebody cut us and then he just zoomed in front of us and we got scared and we did some kind of messy there, and we recovered. Okay, that person gone. He did not. There is no chance for him to stop and ask even the apology. There is no such kind of choice left there, right? We are going on 70, 80 miles per hour. That person came in front of and suddenly cut you, and then he left, and you got upset. You did something. But here, the point is, are you going to forgive him there? There is no choice to forgive that person because they already left the spot.
See,
Here,
go ahead.
yeah. So here the scenario is you are not forgiving, but you are just moving on, passing it. You are not, there is no question of forgive here, but you are ignoring not to remember that incident happened, and you are just passing on it. But are you going to really don't remember that going forward? You will definitely remember that that person did something like this. This is not something called forgive, but ignoring and moving on. That's the difference.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Sairam. I just noted down a few of the see because when we read this code, what what captured me is I think Jyotiji mentioned about the evil-minded person. Okay, how do we know? See, in this case, maybe Prithviraj's action, Muhammad Gori, as you said, we don't know the background. So he might have already known that he's an evil person, and in spite of that, might have forgiven him. Or it could be that out of his benevolence, his nature, Prithviraj's nature is okay, even though he attacked me, he got defeated. Okay, let him go. At least I'll spare his life. Okay, let him go and survive. So that is possible. So we don't know what exactly happened. But what Swami says is he just quotes that as an example. So basically, this is a topic on discrimination, how we have to use the discrimination to decide what we need to do. So it's not exactly on forgiveness, but I just thought that it is relevant because we had discussed this topic. So I just wrote a few questions. How do we know who is cruel minded? So we don't know. So in this particular case, it may be black and white. So, but in a real life scenario, when somebody is doing something and you're upset and so you how do we know that the other person is cruel minded? So we don't know. So 99% it may be just like this case of somebody cutting in front of us and we getting upset, or it could be a friend who has done something, told something that you don't, that is not in line with you, something like that. That is the common happenings. So in that case, I don't think this is applicable. So in this one is more like um, who, I mean, where that forgiveness is going to come back and affect you. So maybe in that case that you mentioned in your family, that might be that we don't know why that person would repeatedly do the same thing. Maybe that person did not realize that it was hurting the other person, or it they know, and if they do it, then that is akin to cruel minded.
See, that is again within family. We cannot get away from them. Immediate family, we cannot divorce our parents, siblings, or whatever. Immediate family, I'm talking about. So in that case, when Swami says we should know the nature of the person, even though you know the nature of such persons, it's very hard. Then what can we do? We cannot change the other person. We cannot even change ourselves. It takes a long time, hard work. But only thing is like we can forgive them in our mind. They don't even ask for your forgiveness, or they don't care. Okay. So then Swami says, forgive them once or twice, and then it can harm you. In the last paragraph, he says, I was surprised to read that. So there is a saying that, you can fool me once, shame on you. You fool me twice, shame on me. So we keep, repeatedly, we put ourselves in that situation, or knowingly or unknowingly, and then we keep complaining about that person is, doing this, doing that. It is only reflecting our character, how we deal with it. That is where we can focus on. Forget about the other person. Absolutely no control over what they say, what they do. So that's what I think we can only focus on ourselves.
Yeah, I'm thinking comparing this cruel person to something like you're going on a road and then there is a big pothole that's not been repaired. You see that over and over again, and you don't just go into that and get, oh, this is, every time you go and get hurt and, talk about, why it is not working or get angry about that. Know that that is there, and so avoid it, as much as possible, and go around it. And so, like, a snake or, a scorpion. Another story is a scorpion. Scorpion is suffering. So this Swamiji said, okay, I'm going to take it and put it. Each time, it takes it, it bites him. And so the disciples ask him, why are you doing this over and over again? That is his nature, and my nature is to help. And so, uh, so sometimes, we have to keep, contrary to what he says, sometimes we have to know it's not really cruelty there. So you cannot really see it. The behavior, that is a natural behavior which is affecting you, but you cannot call that cruel. That's what I know. Not everything is cruel, but that can still harm you.
Sairam, so I think forgiveness is an attitude of not holding grudges, and that is somewhat different from making yourself vulnerable or keeping yourself vulnerable. Okay? So you have to defend your own interests at all costs, and always others will be trying to impose on you or your territory or whatever. So it's not a question of making yourself vulnerable. Forgiveness is an attitude of not holding grudges. Okay. And always having the hope that tomorrow we will have a better deal. But I am defending myself. It is called hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Okay. Number two, see, Prithviraj, so the Prithviraj was vulnerable there. The problem was not the forgiveness, not Muhammad Gori. Anybody might have come and defeated. Is Muhammad Gori the only bandit in the world? If Prithviraj was militarily weak, anybody could have come and defeated him. So the problem is not forgiving Gori. The problem is leaving yourself vulnerable or becoming weak. That is to be opposed. Number three, see this whole question of cruel people and how do we know they are cruel and do we forgive and all. Sort of, I would say it's beside the point because the entire purpose of the social institutions is to create contexts that will minimize people hurting each other and promote people helping each other. That is the purpose of social institutions, rules, laws, and all that. So, therefore, the focus should be on not whether determining somebody is cruel or not, but the enforcing our rules and regulations so that the cruel people don't have the context or opportunity to show the cruelty. And what is happening inside is another story. So that is what I would say. Thank you.
Okay, Sairam. So what I okay, so I think we can look at the other questions. What are the consequences of forgiving such persons or not forgiving? Or what options do we have in dealing with persons who repeat the actions? What can we do? We have covered all that. We did.
Sairam, that
Yeah.
is
For our own sake.
institutions. What options do we have in dealing with persons who repeat the actions? Social institutions, so social context building, education, right? See, if we go on educating something, at least 10% shift will be there even in the worst. After that, many people will be afraid of the law. See, you cannot have a perfect solution. You can only go towards a better and better situation.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
yes, you should have well-defined laws and proper enforcement of laws. The question is not how we deal. This is a social problem. The
Yeah.
approach should be social. That is my submission. Number two, if I may, that was perhaps a good example of Prithviraj and Gori. It's definitely illustrating the point. But actually, there are many such examples in history. The example I'm able to remember at this time is one very bad character called Bebas, who was forgiven by one Muslim ruler. Bebas also Muslim, Tukuz. So Tukus once forgave Bebas, who was his rival in something. When Bebas became his commander in chief, Tukus became Sultan. All that happened. Bebas wanted to become Sultan. He betrayed Tukus and killed him.
Mm.
That is the one example I remember. But there are other examples in Greek history and mythology also where this regularly happens. One fellow forgives, the other guy doesn't reciprocate. Instead, he kills him or does something.
So I want
So,
to
yeah.
bring you back to the spiritual aspect. The reason why we are talking is for the spiritual aspect of individual, right? Yes, history, there are, as we said before, the snake, the fire, they all have their own characteristics, and that's what they are. So the forgiveness, we are not saying that, hey, forgiving you, going and saying I'm forgiving. Understand the nature, and the thing is more focus on what your mind is it getting agitated, is it getting angry, is it thinking over and over, ruminate. So all those things are detrimental for our spiritual development. So that's what we have to think about. So focus on forgiving. That doesn't mean that you're forgiving the actions or that you are going to go and allow the same person to do the same. So it is more of an internal thing for our spiritual development, because when we are calm, when we are not agitated, we are not angry, that's when we are able to do the right, take the right actions. Right actions have to be taken. So
Again, I want to repeat what I said last week. The forgiveness is for our own sake, like the pot holding the acid corrodes the pot. Like if we say whatever grudge or anger we hold in our heart, it is harming us only, not the other person. So it's worth remembering that every time we want to forgive or not, it's a choice. The other person may not be asking for your forgiveness, but for our own sake, Jaiba is saying the car driver went off, but we are holding on to that, right?
Exactly.
For,
Yeah.
So for our own peace of mind, let it go.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's I was going to say the same thing. So I think we should just, if we are going to forgive, one second, if we are going to forgive, when somebody cuts you in front of it, just give that space and not even be bothered about it. Just don't have anything against that person. Don't blame that person. Don't say, oh, how is he driving? How is that person? So because as Subramaniam said, the law is there. When something like that happens, the police, if that policeman is there, he's going to give a ticket. So the law is there to prevent such things. But in spite of that, if it happens, you don't hold grudge over it. Just let it happen and keep going. I think that is otherwise you're only getting affected by it. Your heartbeat races. Yes.
I think not only that, right? Suppose if the person comes and goes, so I think depending on the nature of the person, the other person, sometimes you start abusing him. So you keep quiet. No, you start abusing him, maybe you go and try to chase him and then fight with him. So that sort of things, I think if you start forgive him, probably your mind will be peaceful. So that is one thing. And second thing is coming to the who is cruel minded. I think that, in my opinion, that comes only with your experience. We don't know, right? First time somebody commits a mistake, we don't know whether it's a cruel minded or not. That's why in the previous chapter they said, no, at least forgive once or twice. So in spite of forgiving him for more than 2 times, still, you're committing the same mistake, then I think you can judge, oh, this guy is a cruel minded, don't even attempt to forgive. And also second, as the question says, consequences of forgiving. I think the not forgiving should not come into picture, and at least for 2 or 3 times, right? So if sometimes what happens, right? If you start forgiving one time or second time, that other person will realize, I'm committing a mistake. Why this guy is forgiving me first time? Oh, I'll commit another mistake. Second time again, no, you'll forgive him. Then the nature of some certain people, right? They realize, oh, maybe no, I'm making mistakes. In spite of committing mistake, this guy is started forgiving me. So I should stop. I should stop committing any mistake. I think not forgiving is not a good option unless you try for a couple of times. Then you'll, I think there's a proverb, right? Somebody said, no. So if somebody is hitting you on one side of the face,
You have to
show
solve.
another face. Asking him to hit the other side also. Then that guy will realize, why I already hit him, but still he's not bothered, but still he's asking me to hit the other side also. So something wrong with me, so I should keep quiet.
So if they realize, then it's good. But if that person is, or in nature is to keep hitting you again and again, but then avoid. That is the thing. So because I agree completely, if you're going to change yourself and be not forgiving or hold grudges against that person, that's not good, because you're going to hold that. It's going to affect, just like the acid in the pot, it's going to affect. So the best is to avoid that. So the solution, I think, is to avoid that situation. When there is a repeat offenders, when there are this one, best is to avoid and move out. And maybe best is to not communicate, or I mean, you can do you can attempt maybe a few times, but if it doesn't help, then it's just better to move out.
No, there is no need. Exactly. I was going to say, what is the meaning of not forgiving? I will not forgive repeat offenders. What is the actual meaning of not forgiving? You
Is
will
holding
avoid.
grudges. Yeah.
You will avoid. Practically, you will avoid. There's no need to hold a grudge. You let him go, and you let the grudge also go. But what I want to say is that okay, I've forgotten. I'll come.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Sairam.
yeah,
So I think we will.
I just want to make one point that I think it is Gandhiji who said it. If we are like in a revenge mode, somebody did harm and you do harm, like eye for an eye will make you blind.
Blind.
Right? So it's not going to achieve anything.
Correct. Okay. Okay, Sairam. I think we will move on. See, last time, last session, we had this question about how can one forgive one's own self? Is that important? And I think that is very important, because many times we are bottled up with our own actions, past actions, and we are not able to deal with it. And it's just that acid that keeps burning, and you don't have a solution. You don't have a means to go and correct that action that had happened in the past. So I thought that was a good thing. Yes, Sabita, please go ahead.
Yeah, we are talking about some other people, right? The other person, but that is really important. If we can't forgive our own self or even love ourselves. I remember Sandra, you remember Sandra, she always said that to me. You can't love yourself or forgive yourself, then how are you even able to do it to someone else? I think that's what this whole journey is about, right? It's us. And so it's challenging, but the question to the answer to the question is, to me, it is important.
It is important. So I thought that we will take up that. So let's break that into more questions. First of all, do we have the urge to forgive ourselves? So in other words, when, let's say, something happened in the past, we did something wrong in the past, and do we have that means to forgive our actions in the past action? Do we even feel that we should forgive that action?
Sairam.
When do we get that?
Sairam. So I think here Jaisbai's point becomes very relevant, that you have to repent yourself. That repentance should be there inside. Then I think in the previous slide, how do we forgive ourselves? We forgive ourselves first by repenting.
Yeah. So when do we reach that stage of repentance? In other words, we have to realize that whatever we did is wrong. So many times what happens is our ego comes and justifies our actions. So even though you may have a half-hearted thing, maybe I did, then the ego will come and tell you that what you did was not wrong. It is right. Okay, the other person was wrong, and it will come and justify that. So when do we have that urge to say, oh, I did wrong, so I need to, then comes the question of forgiving. Yes.
So the forgiving yourself, there are two items here. One is it affecting you only? Like you made a decision which is affecting you only, it's a mistake you did. And then you might forgive yourself the moment it happened, or it might happen later after some time when you realize that you did a mistake. More than that, asking forgiveness is more tougher than forgiving yourself, because that's where ego kicks in. We all know that we did a mistake, even in a family. Suppose morning I yelled at somebody in my family member, but I know I yelled unnecessarily. So I'm going to ask the apology. That's where ego kicks in. I'll just keep quiet with the face, stone face, and not because I know I did a mistake. I'm not going to, I'm sorry. Saying sorry and asking forgiveness is more tougher than forgiving oneself. Yeah.
Somehow I thought forgiving ourselves is more hard in the sense we are hard on ourselves. We are our worst critic. A lot of times we are, or is it only me? you know, we always second guess, or we always think, is that the right thing I did? Is that the right thing I said? Or whatever it is, it might be. Could have done better. You know, I shouldn't have reacted this way. I should have known better. This kind of dialogue goes on in our head. We don't have to admit to anybody else. In that sense, it might be easy to say sorry to the next person, but in the heart of heart, our conscience that pricks us. So it will be hard for us to forgive ourselves if it relates to your children or your spouse or at work. First of all, we have to be honest. We have to be really honest with ourselves. We have to look in the mirror to be honest. And then when do we come to the point that we need to have some kind of a maturity, some understanding that what had happened, what was our role in that particular situation, and then be very honest with ourselves to forgive ourselves to begin with. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, so I work at NASA, so there are many times failures occur. And so when that occurs, so the point is not to look for, who to be blamed. So if we go with that approach, you will never find a solution. Everybody will be getting angry, but you go to the root cause of why it occurred. And so, nobody is going to be blamed, find out why it occurred. And every occasion when they did it that way, the root cause of the problem could be, identified, and that helped a lot. And sometimes they come up with this, classic 1 or 2 word phrase that explains a very major accident. And I want to just quote one of them. Colombia, the shuttle, 2003, when on re-entry, one of our Indian, person was there as astronaut. Kalpana Chawla was there. And so that, came through, and when they investigated, the whole thing was summarized into 3 words. And a normalization of deviation. That's the word. That's the phrase. So what was happening was these, the ice crystals that were forming on the insulation. If the temperature was very cold in Kennedy, the moisture actually, condensed, and then in the space they start dropping and hitting on those tiles which are protecting for re-entry. So that happens only when you come back. That's going to impact it. And that's what really happened. So they have seen it before. So there is a good room for blaming people. So, and then they said, okay, it went. So, nothing happened. So next time they see it, last time it was there, nothing happened. So let's go. This might be okay. So this thing size is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And they said, oh yeah, the last time it was there, this time is slightly bigger. Let's go ahead with it. And that's what really happened. So this is what they called as normalization of deviation, that we think we can get away once, so maybe I can do it again. No, we do it again. So I think forgiving ourselves is each time we have to look at, why did we do that? And, we have to, think about that. And that's also very important for
Yes, Sairam.
Yeah.
I also feel that forgiving oneself is difficult. First, we have to realize that we did something wrong. And once we realize it, then we're hard saying, why did I make that mistake? Now, it's easier to say sorry if somebody else has pointed out, because somebody pointed it out and we just immediately say sorry and that we can try to forget about it. So I also feel because we kind of chew and we try to keep thinking about it more when we realize that we made a mistake, because we feel that we have lost control. We think, why did we make a mistake? When we realize it, that we made a mistake already. So of course we have to just say, so right, we are done deal. Just the way we say sorry to others, we just have to say sorry to ourselves. Hey, made a mistake, it's okay. But it is difficult for me as well.
Yeah. See, the thing is, in forgiving ourselves, who forgives whom? Okay, when somebody makes a mistake, and you can forgive that person, or you can seek forgiveness to another person. When we look at ourselves, our past actions, that's what past actions is, what is haunting us. So when we say we forgive ourselves, what does it mean? And who is forgiving whom? And what happens after forgiveness? Because when we say we have forgiven ourselves, that means something has to happen after that. Some state has to differ. If we are going to still continue to remember and harp on it, that means really we might say that I am forgiving myself, but really we are not forgiving. So is there something that what needs to happen there when we say we forgive ourselves? So these are all some of the points. So forgiving ourselves is not, I can say I have forgiven myself for it, but really forgiving, are we doing it, or can we do it, or what are the challenges to it? I thought that is a good one. But before we, in time is running out, I thought that we can. I picked a quote by Howard Murphy, who has written many books on Swami. This is on forgiving ourselves. So I would like Om to read.
In the question of forgiving, what is known as forgiving ourselves must mean the divine self who has no sin, but witnesses the misdemeanors, the trespasses, the foolish errors of the little thoughtless, desire filled ego, must be the forgiver of the sins of the ego. So it is that the sinful ego must be forgiven by the divine self, so that forgiving ourselves is the same as being forgiven by God. Our inner God is no different from the one great eternal God who is omnipresent in the universe. In belief, to be forgiven by God is the same as forgiving ourselves. The inner God forgives the erring ego. It is clear then that this process of forgiving and being forgiven, mending as it does the shattered truth of oneness, is one of the most important roads, the state of living in universal love. This is not far from and may itself be the liberation we seek.
So basically, what he says is, I think when we say we forgive ourselves, the little ego or the little I is seeking the forgiveness of the bigger I that is also resident in us. So that is what is forgiving ourselves mean. That is what Howard Murphy says. So I just I kind of agreed with our thought, and that made sense, because who makes the mistakes? Who makes the mistakes? It's all the ego-filled small I that is making that mistake, because the big I, that is the Atman that is residing in us, which is the same in everybody, cannot make the mistake. So it's the ego. So when we say we forgive ourselves or seek forgiveness of ourselves, it's the small I that is seeking the forgiveness of the big I. So that is what he says, and that's what that makes sense to me. Anybody?
So I don't know how to phrase, but let me explain what I think about big eye and small eye. So it's for me in practical my life. I don't know what is a big eye. I really don't know. All I know is my intellect, my buddhi is saying which is good and which is bad. And sometimes I override that buddhi, do silly things. That's what makes me, happy for some short time, right? But buddhi says this is not good. Maybe I have exam today, but I'm not, tomorrow, and I have to prepare, but for pleasure, I might go to movie. My buddhi says, hey, fool, tomorrow you have exam. Why? Oh, 3 hours I can enjoy. That what satisfies my, temporary pleasure. And then I ignore and I go to. Then where is that? Buddhi is always there and which is always telling which is good and which is bad. So the big eye, maybe that's a spiritual eye. When I realize when I'm in dhyana or in tapas, maybe I realize big eye suddenly appears in the form of some light. I don't know, bliss or whatever we call that. But practical life, as a person, what I can realize is my buddhi tells which is good and which is bad. Despite I do mistakes. Are we going to ignore that, or you're going to make a firm decision? Hey, I did a mistake this time. I'm not going to do it again and again. My buddhi is already saying this. I'm not going to repeat that in my future. That's where that the correctness of what you say called forgive, making
Yes.
right
Yeah.
decision. You are forgiving, you did a mistake, you went a movie yesterday, but never do it for next year going forward until you finish your studies.
Yes.
And you stand on that one. That's what you call forgive. That's what I.
Yeah. 10 minutes back, Venkatji was asking, what does it mean when we are forgiving ourselves? Some behavior must change, some thought pattern must change, some beliefs or ideas must change. Coming back to what he said, I think I agree with him. See, the point in this, I'm telling you, is that, see, Atman will not forgive. Forgive me for saying that. But it is not the job of Atman. That no Hindu, I don't know anything in Hindu belief that will support the view that Atman will forgive. With Atman is not that. Okay, this is coming from a Christian standpoint where forgiveness for them is very important. So this whole thing, I think, is slightly, in my opinion, not supported in Hindu philosophy. Thank you.
I cannot actually agree with what you said, but what we have to realize is, who we really are. But that forgiving and all that, we're always talking about the small I. But in all this philosophy, we have to realize that like Jay Bai said, your conscience is always talking to you, and that is the big I. It is telling you all the time. That is the big I in the sense of a reflected consciousness. It is really the God's thing, which is being reflected in you, but that is still a reflection from there. So I think that is what is meant here by saying that you're doing something wrong, and that is being watched, and it is being told to you. And if you don't do it, one of the things that we have to understand from forgiveness is there are consequences, and we must be ready to face the consequences. The consequences might be tougher, some easier, whatever. But as long as we know that that is what is going to be there, that will help us to be to forgive us.
Sairam, that small I, bigger I, it is confusing for many people to understand. But the bigger I, what we talk about is the Brahman, which is, it's not interested in forgiving us or forgetting us. It has Nirguna Brahman, so for a reason, right? So forget that part. As a human being at the body-mind level, our actions, we judge our actions with our mind only. Only the mind and the ego comes, it's the hardest one. The ego is telling you to do things or justify our actions, whatever. But then we seek forgiveness from our mind only, I think. And the ego, that comes in the way, whether you forgive or not. So the actions of the body, mind, again, it is the removing the thorn with the thorn. We use our mind and the intellect mainly, which is telling what is right and wrong, what we did. So we use all that faculties to understand the problem, what we did, and then forgive. That means what? Not to repeat again the same thing, right? What is forgiveness means at the end of it all? We cannot keep on doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result every time, which will never happen until and unless we clean up our act and not to repeat. Then we have learned a lesson from it. Keep the lesson, but forget the other things, not to repeat it again.
Very good, Saira. Very good point. So that is the basic essence is that I kind of agreed with Shankaran when he said the reflected conscious. So when I mentioned big I, it is not the Nirguna Brahman. It is that part of the Atman that is inside us, which is the reflected consciousness. That is the one that is guiding us. And of course, the intellect is the one we have to use. Everything is part of the mind. We have to use that. But something tells us when we, for example, Dhananjay mentioned, when we have the exam tomorrow and we are going to movie, something tells us that that's not right. Okay. So that part of it is the one that we need to forgive, or I mean, the lower ego or whatever we call that, the smaller I has to forgive, has to seek forgiveness to that reflected consciousness. That is basically, that's what I understand from this quote of Howard Murphy. So I think we are running out of time, so we will stop here. I have a video also, but that is slightly different. That's on Rockefeller, but we don't have time for that today. We can watch that maybe next session. So we will end with Om and Tri Shanti. Anybody? I think we will just end it. Five. Oh, we have another 3 minutes. Sorry, I looked at that clock. Okay. So we have another 3 minutes, Sairam. So it's a 5-minute video. Unfortunately, we can't watch that one, but maybe we can still continue with this. Forgiving oneself is akin to forgiven by God. Why is forgiving oneself necessary? I think we talked about it. How does forgiving oneself help in spiritual path of living in universal love? So he does mention that. And how does it lead to liberation? So let's see how our forgiving ourselves. So let's go, instead of looking at the common life situation, let's look at it from a spiritual standpoint. We commit to doing something, like doing meditation or something, and then we deviate from it. And when we deviate from it, we feel that there is something that is not right. Okay, because the intellect keeps telling that you said you would be doing this, and you are not doing it. Okay, it keeps telling you. Then you want to seek forgiveness. So let's say how that do we feel? Do we continue to feel bad about it and not take action, or do we take action? This could be a simple example, but I'm thinking that if you look at it from a spiritual standpoint, how does forgiving oneself help us in our spiritual path?
I think I'm just reminded of what Mohan Vaidyanathan, I think that's his name, who actually was a guest speaker one time. So at the end of Shrikant, so at the end of the session, we were asking him, he was a guest speaker and we celebrated Swami's birthday. We were asking him, is there anything that we can improve? And, and at that point, he said, do not even talk about what is past. Okay. And so that was actually Swami's message, which he picked up from Puttaparthi. And he said, once the event is over, Swami will never talk about what went wrong or right with that event. He will not dwell on it. So the important thing is, whatever has happened, that's past. Let's see if we can get some of the things we don't repeat, and don't repeat it. Don't be dwelling on something that went wrong in the past. I think that's very important.
Okay, Sairam. I think we will end. Yes, please.
Hello, yes, Sairam. I think forgiving should lead us to raise our level and develop strength enough to overpower the evil which is there. Because if we don't do it, we don't pursue it, we are nowhere. We will be remaining suppressed forever. that serves no purpose, and in fact, it is a threat to yourself as well, as in case of Muhammad Ghori. Had he made himself and his reign strong enough, he would not have suffered those 16 further attacks really. So I think it should develop you into a stronger individual, more powerful and stronger. So I think this is in a way, right? I think this should be taken.
Very excellent point, Saidam. Saidam. Thank you. We will end with Om and Tri Shanti. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Sairam, we will start the bhajans at 6:10.